Village described this convert to Christianity from China who was so thrilled that he'd been accepted into the church that he decided to take a pilgrimage to Rome from Beijing. And he decided this would be a walking pilgrimage. So he walked from village after village, and everywhere he went, people asked him, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm taking a pilgrimage." The moment they realized he was going to a sacred place, people offered him shelter, they offered him food. And he kept going, and then he came to the edge of Europe. As he just entered Europe, people asked him, "What are you doing?" They found out he was taking a pilgrimage. Said, "Oh, there's the parish over there. They have a free room for people like you. Or you can go to the priest's house, which is over there." So he kept going further into Europe, and by the time he was at the heart of Europe, people said, "Oh, here's some money, go stay in a hotel and be comfortable." And this story illustrates two very different worldviews. In one, if you feel compassion for someone, it's your responsibility to act on it. And in the other, we have outsourced our compassion to someone else, and there are institutions which embody that compassion. And I'm here to talk about the Decisions in Ethics Center, which focuses on the first worldview, where the two fundamental values are freedom and compassion. Freedom is embodied with the principle that peaceful, honest people have the right to be left alone, and compassion is embodied in the responsibility that we have to solve the major problems we see in the world around us. So here we are with the Decisions in Ethics Center. We focus in academia on how to solve social problems from the perspective of these values. But the thing is, we are in academia, and this is like an ivory tower, and we often wonder, are these ideas really practical? So the questions that I'm going to pose today for our speaker are not just any easy questions, but three problems that I'll call wicked problems. They really put us in dilemmas. And it'd be great to hear the libertarian perspective. So we know that the libertarian principles, they're very much synonymous, or they agree a lot with our ideas of voluntary social systems. But it'd be great to see how they apply to these wicked problems. So I'd like to pose a meta question behind these problems, which is really about how much government do we want to have in our lives, into how much coercion it imposes in our day-to-day affairs. So that's the thread that runs through all of these questions, because that's the question that common people have. Like, at what point is it okay to accept coercion? So the first one is abortion. And here we have seen two polarized opinions. One is the pro-choice group and the other is the pro-life group. And it's kind of almost ludicrous when you really think about it. Pro-choice people respect life, and pro-life people respect choice. And yet we have very polarized opinions. So the thing is, the values are really not in conflict. Both sides appreciate life and choice. The problem is we haven't come up with a definition of life that both sides can agree upon. So that's where the root of the problem lies. And so the pro-choice group believes that you can, from the time that you can separate life from the mother, that's the time when you can consider it as a life, where the baby can survive. Whereas the pro-life group believes it's last life after conception. So there's a big difference of opinion there. And it's not clear how we could tackle this problem with such a big difference with a legal solution. So it'd be great to hear the candidate's view on this problem. So that's the first wicked problem. The second one is on jobs. And I want to quote Rick Jarrow, who's the author of the Ultimate Anti-Career Guide. So anyone looking for career guidance, I highly recommend this. So he notes, every presidential candidate for the last God knows how many years has campaigned on a platform of more jobs. Notice the platform has been more jobs, not meaningful jobs. Well, listen, the Ant Kingdom has full employment. In 1972, Moscow had bragging rights in the world because everyone had a job. Human beings do not need jobs. Human beings need meaning in their work. So in this country's constitution, there's this idea which is enshrined, which is the pursuit of happiness, not the pursuit of jobs. So that's a big idea in there. But how do you find meaningful jobs, and can it come from outside? So the way I understand it, meaningful jobs is really defined by the individual. And yet, you're faced with situations like we saw in 2008 when there's a massive meltdown of the entire economy, and suddenly you have lots of people, many of them who you really care about, who face very difficult times unless big interventions are done, or at least so we were told. So that is a time when I found a lot of people who really believe in voluntary social systems wavering, thinking, well, maybe this is an exceptional situation where coercion is necessary to save our society. So that's another thorny problem, and it would be great to hear your reflections on what is the role of government in this, and what is the role of the president in tackling this problem. And the third wicked problem is that of the environment. So if you look at human evolution, we've never had to really worry about the problems that we see today around carbon emissions and global warming. It just was never there in the horizon the way it is right now. And that's because we have never seen this much industrial evolution in such a short span of time. So here we are faced with this issue that some parts of the world are getting hotter, and the first fundamental question you ask is, well, is that bad? So if you're in Canada, you're pretty happy growing, producing wine, which was not possible earlier. Siberia has opened up to tourism. But then there are other parts of the world which are at a lot of risk of getting submerged, and a lot of ecosystems are getting destroyed. So that is a very real problem. And the heart of the matter seems to be that the places which are producing or causing these effects are not the same ones which are receiving the outcomes. And in our theoretical models, we've always thought of this as, think of a cocoon, right? If anything that enters our cocoon that I don't want, the person who's sending it has to make me whole. It's a very simple idea. So if I'm downstream, anybody who's sending stuff upstream, say from a river, has to make me whole if that's stuff that I don't want or is harmful to me. And we understand how to deal with this under property rights laws, tort and other constructs like that. So that works pretty well when you're someone in the same proximity and the same jurisdiction. But what do you do when you're in a completely different part of the world, where actions that you take here have an effect somewhere else? And so in reality, we are really in one single large cocoon, this planet. So we're really struggling with legal systems. How do we tackle this problem with a voluntary solution? So that is another big wicked problem. What is the libertarian perspective on this? What should the president's role be on this? With that, I'd like to welcome our candidate. Greg, will introduce him.
Sure.
Thank you.
So the person who was officially supposed to come and introduce Judge Jim Gray is stuck in traffic somewhere between Pleasanton and here. So I picked up the judge from the airport, and so I guess I'm going to do the introduction for Judge Jim Gray. It turns out that my hometown of Santa Ana, California, in Orange County, is where Judge Gray was a municipal court judge for 7 years, after which he was the Superior Court judge for 20 years, and I'm pleased to report that I never came across him in my youth. So that's a good thing.
I was thinking you're just off parole.
I never went to his office where he did all his work, which is fine with me. Prior to that, he was in the Peace Corps. Where were you in the Peace Corps?
Costa Rica.
Costa Rica. And he also served in Vietnam, in the Navy. And he's gained quite a bit of national prominence when he came out as a judge against the drug war. And so I personally think that a lot of why he's on the Libertarian Party ticket with Governor Gary Johnson is because they see eye to eye on this issue. Neither of them think that it makes a lot of sense to be incarcerating hundreds of thousands of Americans over something like this. And so I know that the judge had a few items he was going to touch on prior to coming, and hopefully maybe we can write your 3 wicked problems on the board or something so that it's easier to keep them in mind. But with that, I'd like to welcome Judge Jim Gray.
Well, thank you. Good evening, and thank you, Greg. Thank you for being here. I want to talk about what you want to talk about, and and I have some interesting questions to discuss here, and we'll certainly go through them. And really, give me about 10 or 15 minutes, and then if you have some clarification or some question on the issue that we're discussing, ask it, because it's a fairly small group, and I'd just love to be able to discuss what you want to talk about. In fact, I could, if you wanted me to, keep this really short. I'm going to ask you a question. How many of you believe that the federal government has all the answers? Okay, that completes my presentation. Everything I say will fall from that. Okay, and I can go home and read all of it. Look, the federal government does not. Yes, the federal government does have a place, without question. We're libertarians. We believe in government. We believe in smaller government. We believe in less intrusive government. We believe in local government. The most local government that's able to handle various issues should be left to be able to do that, if not the individuals themselves. So where should the federal government be? And that's really pretty easy to answer. In fact, most of these things are fairly straightforward and easy to answer. You can look at our supreme law of the land, the Constitution of the United States of America, and this is the most brilliant document ever created, in my view, by the hand of mankind. Literally the summation of the Enlightenment. And it really talks about Article 1, Section 8 is a good place to start. I do not think that California should have its own treaty with Japan. No, I think that's a federal issue. And the military and coining currency, although that's a little more in debate. But these are things that we really need to look at. The concept of federalism, by the way, our country was founded on the concept of federalism. Namely, allow each state to decide how best to serve its people, if that's an area in which the federal government has not been delegated power. And then, of course, we have literally 50 crucibles of democracy where we can figure out what works and what doesn't. So yes, I actually met, how many of you actually know who Governor Gary Johnson is as we speak? Quite a few. That's actually discouraging to me in some ways, because instead of talking to people that know, I'd rather be out there talking to people that don't. But all of that is fine. To introduce the whole story, yes, I'm a former drug warrior. In fact, I was in the U.S. Attorney's Office prosecuting drug cases, held the record for the largest drug prosecution in the Central District of California back in 1978. 75 kilos of heroin, 165 pounds, was and is a whole bunch of heroin. By the way, do you know what the record prosecution is today in the Central District of California? 18 tons of cocaine in one place, so you can see how much progress we're making. So I actually saw in my own courtroom how we're churning low-level drug offenders through the system for no good purpose whatsoever, and actually decided that, look, who better to discuss this issue than somebody that's fairly, I'll leave it to you, but fairly clean-cut, never used any form of illicit substances, conservative judge in a conservative county. So I decided to do something extremely unusual back in 1992 and actually held a press conference saying our nation's drug policy is not working. We couldn't do it worse if we tried. Let's put our heads together and come up with something different, because yes, we're having drug problems in our country, and I'm not minimizing the drug problems themselves, but about 90% of the problems in this area are drug prohibition related. It's drug money related, and that's where we're really missing the boat. I'll leave that alone for the moment. If you want to talk more about drug policy, feel free. But I didn't know who Governor Gary Johnson was either until 1999, when he actually, as the sitting governor of New Mexico, also held a press conference. He said he had conducted what he called his audit and determined that our nation's drug policy was not working, and he was going to institute changes in New Mexico. And he did. And actually, he had a drug policy forum in Albuquerque about a month or so thereafter. I was invited to go speak, and then I got to know him at that point. And I've been following him ever since. By the way, just rather traumatic for me, or waxing really kind of emotional, because the last time I was actually on the Stanford campus, I met over here at the Hoover Institute with Milton Friedman, and we were talking to him, and he first introduced me to the school choice issue, which I'm going to talk with you about here. Clearly a brilliant man, and just really an exciting guy. I actually wrote a book on drug policy. It was published in 2001. Actually, we published a second edition this year, but it was endorsed by Milton Friedman, by George Shultz, who's also over here at the Hoover Institute, by Walter Cronkite, and by Governor Gary Johnson. So I thought, you know, that's a pretty good foursome. But at any rate, I got to know Governor Johnson. When he started running for president, I started calling him the most qualified person to be president of the United States that I know of. And it's a true statement. Probably in my lifetime, he is the best most qualified person to be president of our country that I really know of, because he just has no ego to get in the way. He's done this sort of thing, and I can talk to you a little bit more about him. When he graduated from University of New Mexico, he actually started his own handyman company out of his garage. He was the handyman. He turned that into the largest construction company in New Mexico, actually had about 1,000 employees, gave value for his dollar, and never actually laid anybody off in good times or bad. He's able to make payroll and make it work. And then he was the two-term governor of New Mexico. He actually has more administrative experience as we speak than both Romney and Obama combined. Left the state with $1 billion surplus and actually was instrumental. He wouldn't deny this because he didn't create any jobs in the private sector, as he says, but he was instrumental because he streamlined regulations, got the government more out of the way, made the government more user-friendly and understandable, and that resulted in the creation of more jobs in the private sector per capita than any other state. So he is the guy. But I'm not here to talk about drug policy. What I am here to talk about is 3 things that I hope are on your mind. And then we can talk about anything else you want to. I will also address the 3 issues behind me. But those issues are the economy, jobs, and education. We'll go through those. I'll talk about the soul of our country as well. And I'll talk about a little practical politics going on here. That'll leave time because I'm really interested in listening to your question. And if you have clarifying questions along the way, please feel free to ask. The economy should be on everyone's jobs. In fact, now in the last couple of months since the universities have come back into session, I tell people, like you, that I have a rather substantial defect as a candidate, which means I tell the truth. And that is not always the thing that happens in running for political office. But sometimes I can be blunt, and I'm going to be blunt right now. I will look at you folks and say that you are bankrupt. You are bankrupt. My generation has made such a mess of this. We've been so financially irresponsible. We're going to look to our children to pay it back, and my grandchildren are bankrupt. And if you're not interested in this, and you better be, because it's your future, of course it's our country's future as well. Why am I crying wolf? The answer, I don't believe, is that I am. Because you must understand the truth, which is for every dollar today that the federal government spends, we're borrowing 43 cents. Think of that. Let that permeate into your thought processes. For every dollar that we are now spending, we are borrowing or printing 43 cents. No company can possibly do that and stay in existence. No household can possibly do that without going through bankruptcy, and neither can any country. Come on, folks, let's really tell it like it is. We are Greece in so many ways, but we don't have Germany and the European Union to back us up. And we're so much bigger that when we fall, if we do, and I pray, of course, that does not happen, but we're not going to have anybody there to catch us. We could get into hyperinflation where our money would be worth nothing, and that is an extreme possibility because of the way we are going. So, we're going to address this. Governor Gary Johnson is financially responsible as well as socially tolerant. That places us in the mainstream of American political thought today. No one will accuse Barack Obama of being financially responsible. And honestly, no one will accuse Mitt Romney of being socially tolerant. We are in that mainstream. So, anytime you have a significant problem, you go through a 3-step process towards its resolution. The first step is to understand that you have a problem. I think we're there now. Anybody have a question about that? I believe not. Number 2 then step is you've got to explain the problem. And we're going to do that with regard to our country. We are going to have an audit of the entire federal government because we are spending much too much money. And we're going to show that audit publicly using generally accepted accounting principles. Now, any public company, any public corporation is required by law to have an audit at least once a year using generally accepted accounting principles. We have never done that in the history of the United States of America, and we're going to do it now, including the Pentagon. The Pentagon says, oh, no, not us, national security, and we say we're not going to give away any national secrets. We're going to have an audit of our entire federal government and show you where we stand. And then the third step is people are going to have to share the pain. And I am absolutely dead-bang convinced that Americans are prepared to share the pain as long as they first understand there is a problem, and secondly, they believe that they're acting on accurate information, and they believe that it will not only fall upon them, but it will fall upon others that are equally able to address it. I'm convinced of that. Now, where is this issue going? I will tip my cap to Mitt Romney. The first time I really felt that he was serious about our economy was when he chose Paul Ryan to be his running mate. Before that, I wasn't convinced. However, Paul Ryan, this radical budget that you've heard of, radical indeed. If you pencil it out, and he's agreed to this, Paul Ryan's budget will not balance our federal budget for 28 years, assuming some growth that may or may not be there. We are going to submit a balanced budget to Congress in 2013. Now, we acknowledge you're not naive. We don't pass the budget, that's up to Congress. And there will be some give and take and all, and I will confess to you that we're not going to actually have a balanced budget right then, but we're sure going to work a long way toward it. So how are we going to do this? Let's first start about the military. By the way, I am the only one of the 6 of us running for president or vice president that served in the military. And in fact, I think that gives me some insights that no one else would have. Besides that, I'm really unique, and at least as far as I know, I'm one of 2 people in the history of the United States Navy to be awarded a combat action ribbon on a training cruise. It's just kind of one of those things. I was actually sent to the rivers of Vietnam on my midshipman cruise between my 2nd and 3rd years of law school. And the entire ship, we were in the rivers of Vietnam, and the entire ship was awarded this combat action ribbon. And I tell you also this by saying that I have seen what happens when we put our troops into conflicts where they're not well provided for, and that is not going to happen under our Johnson-Gray administration. But today, we are saying publicly, we are not going to use our military troops in actions unless our security is at threat. Our national interests are at stake. How many of you believe, as we sit here, that Somalia is a security threat to the United States of America? It is not. How about Yemen? How about the Sudan? Okay, I got one hand. Maybe you're thinking of Al-Qaeda, and if you are, I understand. However, when you really look at it, for a variety of reasons, so many other countries of the world have much more of a reason to be concerned about Al-Qaeda than we. Turkey, Saudi Arabia, for heaven's sake, Russia, these countries too. Why are we putting ourselves out there in this harms and in these conflicts? We can't afford it. It isn't working. It's counterproductive. We're going to bring our troops out of those conflicts. Afghanistan. Look, you must understand that we believe we should have gone into Afghanistan. September 11th, 2001, it was a direct act of war against the United States of America. It did not happen by Afghanistan as such. It happened by Al-Qaeda and those other folks, but it basically was condoned by Afghanistan off their property, off their land. We had every right to go in there and root these people out and bring them to justice. What, 30 days, maybe 60, maybe even 120? We have been there 11 years. Anything we can possibly accomplish in that amount of time, we've already accomplished. Much too long. We've spent $1 trillion there. It isn't working. I actually do a lot of flying now, as you can imagine, on this campaign. And I saw a full-bird colonel from the United States Air Force on a plane with me, started making conversation with him. And I said, Colonel, you're just making conversation. Where are you stationed now? And he told me, I don't remember what he said. And then he said, you know, but at least I'm not in Afghanistan and Iraq. I said, Colonel, I've never been to Afghanistan. Tell me, is what we're doing there working? He literally got sad. He shook his head and said, no, it isn't working. It's counterproductive. We'll never be able to affect anything positive there. We should leave. Understand, the reality of Afghanistan is it's tribal. You have these various tribal leaders. They do not get along one with the other. Of course, we've exacerbated the problem because we've turned them into drug lords as well, which causes additional problems. But they don't get along with each other. They don't want to. They've never had a strong central government. They don't want a strong central government. The only thing that unifies these tribes is what? When a foreign invader comes in to occupy the land, and then they unify to get rid of that foreign invader. Guess who they are now? We must leave Afghanistan now. That is worthy of applause. If you don't believe that, you can ask Napoleon. You can ask the Soviet Union. The beginning and the end of the Soviet Union, in my estimation, is when they went into Afghanistan. Same thing with the English, did the same thing with us. So that's part of our 43%. In addition, you must understand as well, today, as we speak, the United States has somewhere between 900 and 1,000 military bases in foreign countries. Military bases, reservations in foreign countries, depending on how you define them. If we are not isolationist, get that thought away from you, we are not. It's naive in today's world to be isolationist, but if those bases are necessary for our security, I say terrific, keep them there, reinforce them as far as that's concerned. But I would warrant that without even scratching our heads more than once, we could close down 80% of those and still be safe and fully as secure as we are now, and in fact many more so. And to explain that for a moment, let me tell you, I like New Zealanders. Been to New Zealand, like them, like their approach, everything else. But I suggest to you that if New Zealand had an Air Force base in Walnut Creek or San Jose, and you start listening to their planes flying over, and some of their GIs get drunk and beat up some people or anything else, I'd love their money, but I'd probably pretty much stop liking New Zealanders. That's what's happening to us. It is not helping our security. And I will take the extreme position that I do not believe that Germany is going to be attacked by Austria in my lifetime. Why do we have these troops still in Germany? Japan is not going to be attacked by the Philippines. And besides, Japan is doing pretty well anyway. South Korea is a bit different. We should keep some troops there. How many? I don't know. Let's talk to the military experts. Let's find out. But South Korea is doing pretty well off as well. We can't afford it. We're going to bring those troops home, and we'll spend the money here in San Francisco area or in Nebraska or New Jersey. We'll spend it in our country. I read a magazine article a while ago, and a woman lived in a small town in Germany next to a U.S. Army base, and she was horrified with the idea that we could close that U.S. Army base because 92% of the revenue of my town comes from the U.S. Army, and she's probably right. To which I say, you know something, I understand, we're going to spend that money at home. We can't afford it. The biggest security threat to the United States of America is what? Is a weak and failing economy. Mark my words, and that takes superseding precedence. We are required to keep ourselves strong for security reasons or any others. We've got to take these steps, and this is what we will do. Now, I'm going to change gears a little bit. I will come back to the economy, but I want to talk about schools. Anybody here have children? Let me ask you a question. Who is in a better position to decide where and how your children should be educated? You as the parent or the federal government?
The parent.
I've never had anybody answer that question differently. The parent. Now, the shoes on your feet. What is he talking about? The shoes on your feet are a consumer item. You pretty much decide when you're in the market for some shoes what type of shoes you want to buy, the style, the color, and approximately how much you want to pay. Yes? And then when you buy your shoes, generally you're pretty much accepted and comfortable with the decision you made. That's the way it is with most consumer items. They're purchased from the ground up. They're purchased from the consumer up. Your cars, your refrigerator, whatever it is you're going to buy, that's the way they're purchased. And that's great. Competition, it works. Education is completely different. Education is funded from the top down. We have a lot of money with the federal government. They keep a bunch for their administration, give it to the states. They keep a bunch for their administration, give it to the school district. They keep a bunch for their administration, goes to the schools. And we all know most at least public schools are top-heavy with administration. But the consumers do not get to choose how and where that money is going to be spent. And who are the consumers? The parents. If you change that around and allow the parents to decide where and how that money will be spent, I'm not talking about changing the funding, still be from the federal government and the states, whatever it is, it will remain, but you allow the parents to dictate, to choose where that money is going to be spent. And you can call it a voucher, you can call it a scholarship, I don't care what you call it. You give the parents that choice. They will what? They will demand excellence. Now, I'm a school, okay? Public, private, I don't care. We'll call it the gray school. And I'm not doing a good job, okay? I am not doing a good job. And by the way, I think you will all agree with me, many public schools in our country are failing our children. Agree?
Yes.
Unacceptable. Got to be changed. So I am one of those failing schools. What's going to happen? Now the parents can choose where and how their children are going to be educated. So if you're nice, even though I'm failing your children here, you'll come to me and say, Greg, get it together, or I'm going to take my daughters and go to, what's your name?
Ed.
Ed? Ed. I'm going to go to Ed school. Ed, boy, that works. That's a plant.
Department of Ed.
Okay, it's the Department of Ed, that's right. Okay, so what am I going to do? I'm going to start taking this seriously, and I'll start getting better, to which I say, good, maybe you'll be satisfied. If not, you're going to take your kids and go to the Ed school. What am I going to do? What's he doing that I'm not? And I'll start getting better. Again, to which I say, good, competition is healthy. What if I don't? What if I continue to fail? I'll go out of business. I see my customers leaving, I'll go out of business. And then, what's your name? Peter. Look at it. He's an entrepreneur. You can just tell. Okay? Peter will come in and buy my school area, and he'll put in a better school. You know, he'll use the internet. He'll bring in more innovation. Whatever he's going to do, he's going to start giving value. He's going to realize, by the way, not everybody in the world needs to be a PhD in psychiatry. Maybe some people would like to be an aircraft mechanic, a medical doctor, whatever. Wherever the people are, holding this money voucher in their hand saying, come to me and put in a good school, it will be met. It's happened in Milwaukee. The last 5 years, they have had these school voucher programs in Milwaukee. I was there about 2 weeks ago, and they looked at me and said, you know, Judge Gray, it's really sensational. Most of our bad schools are gone. Because it works. It's basically like the GI Bill. You know, if you're in the military, you can get a voucher in effect from the government, and you can go to Holy Cross, you can go to Notre Dame, you can come to Stanford, wherever you can go. That works. Milton Friedman, actually at the Hoover Institute, when we were there talking drug policy, at a recess, he started talking about this school voucher program. And I said, Dr. Friedman, I'm a product of the public schools. I don't want to undercut the public schools. I believe in them. He looked at me and said, Jim, I'm going to ask you 2 questions. The first question is, if you are the parent of a college-aged child, where do you want your child, what country in the world do you want your child to go to get the best education he or she can? And I said, oh, I'm not really sure, but I think the United States of America. He said, I think you're right. Second question, if you are the parent of a high school age child, where in the world do you want your child to go to get the best education that he or she can? And I said, I'm not sure, but probably not the United States of America. He said, I think you're right. What's the difference? We have competition in college and not competition in high school. From that moment, from the Hoover Institute, I became an advocate of school vouchers, of choice in schools. What's going to happen with the teachers? Well, today again, we realize in most public schools that good teachers are not stupid. And they realize that more money is in administration than in the classroom. So what happens? You've seen it. The better teachers actually gravitate out of the classroom into administration. That will be different at the Ed school, won't it? Teachers will be in demand. They will be paid better. I have a good teacher at my school, good school or not, and I'm not paying her enough. What's going to happen? This guy over here, Ed, hound that he is going to inveigle that. He's going to entice my good teachers. They'll be paid more. They'll be happy. What's going to happen with the poor teachers? Well, a lot of poor teachers have been beaten up. You know, a lot of regulation. This No Child Left Behind stuff is a morass of administration. And by the way, we have the Department of Education of the United States of America has something in the order of 4,600 employees, $60 billion in a budget. Now, part of that money goes to the schools, and I'm not changing that. 4,600 people. What do you think they do? They create more bureaucracy, and then they deal with the state bureaucracy who has to respond to it. They just furnish an existence for themselves, doesn't help educate our children. So a lot of these poorer teachers now are not producing because they've basically been beaten up by the system, and they've determined, you know, I can be paid pretty well whether I perform or not. So if you go to this new system, the poor teachers that could perform better will do better, and that's great, that works. And the ones that cannot, okay, they'll lose their jobs. That does not trouble me whatsoever. This system will work. We will, as a matter of our 43%, back on the economy issue, we will eliminate the Department of Education. and we will be better off. There are others departments as well. In fact, you know Rick Perry, governor of Texas, was actually in these debates as a Republican, said, I'm going to eliminate 3 of the agencies, and then he couldn't remember what they are. I can remember. And I agree. One of them is the Department of Education, the other one is the Department of Energy, and the Department of Commerce. You could also maybe take HUD, we can look, but look,
How about
remember,
agriculture?
what, Department of Agriculture, my goodness sakes, when Department of Agriculture was put into business, there was something like 1 bureaucrat for every 3,000 farmers. Now, I'm not saying it's 1-to-1, but it's awfully close. And we need to look at the Department of Energy, for heaven's sakes. In fact, let's talk about that. Today, the Department of Energy, as well as a lot of other part of the federal government, is picking winners and losers in the marketplace. In fact, you were talking earlier about the Soviet Union. I have a story, this is actually a true story, that there was the presiding justice of our Court of Appeal down in Orange County. But when he was on our court, I was sitting at lunch with him one time in the judge's lunchroom. He'd just been back from Moscow, and he stayed at the best hotel at the time in Moscow. How long ago was this? That's probably 20 years ago or so, maybe longer. At any rate, it was still when the Soviet Union was invoked. And in the Soviet Union, they had no problems with unemployment. Everybody had a job. And there was one man in this best hotel in Moscow whose job was every morning to go downstairs, plug in his vacuum cleaner, switch it on, and vacuum the rug in the lobby. Okay? That's what he did. Every day, plugged it in, switched it, and vacuumed the rug in the lobby. The problem was, as Justice Sills told me, the vacuum cleaner had broken months before. They didn't have any spare parts. Nevertheless, he would plug it in, switch it on. Of course, nothing happened, and he would vacuum the rug. And he looked at me and said, there's no way that a system like this can prevail. And he was right. Now, talk about jobs for a minute, and directly responsive, because I was on the subject. Oh, no. Sorry, not to jobs yet. We'll talk about that in a minute. Talk about the Department of Energy, picking winners and losers. Today, the Department of Energy, for whatever reason, has decided that with regard to ethanol, which, by the way, 10% of the gasoline in California is required to be ethanol, biofuels. They've decided that corn is the right crop to make the ethanol. Now, it's not my area, but I can tell you that this is something that the marketplace could figure out really quickly. I was on a radio show. I'm doing a lot, mostly on the war on drugs, and I've been doing this. I've been on the O'Reilly Factor a couple of times. I've been on a lot of TV and radio. And I was doing one out of Iowa by phone. And some guy who was a farmer in Iowa called in and said, well, Judge Gray, I'm going to talk against my own economic self-interest because I raised corn. However, I'm here to tell you that actually hemp, you can get more ethanol from an acre of hemp than you can an acre of my corn. Corn will clog the carburetors and hemp won't. Now, why is the government choosing? The marketplace will take care of that. And I was in Indiana and Illinois about 3 weeks ago, and I'm here to tell you that drought there is really severe, and the corn crop is in real trouble. Probably, depending on where you are, 30 to 50% of the corn crop in those states is going to be gone. But still, the government requires that ethanol be raised from corn. So you're making an absolute travesty of the hog market, for example, because they eat corn, so that cost has gone way up. The tortilla market, all the way around. You know, get out of it. We say, we're going to have an audit, remember? We will look at all of these various agencies. We'll try to keep an open mind. That's what I do as a judge. And I will look at this, and so will the governor, and we will look at this audit, but I believe that we do not need, cannot afford, and should not have the Department of Energy. Part of the 43%. We're not going to cut everybody's budget 43%. That's crazy. That's insane. There are actually some parts of the government that are working. Keep them there. Pat them on the head and say, way to go. But other ones we can do without. Department of Commerce, probably the same thing. And you were mentioning others, but I'm going to stop, and now I'm going to go to jobs. Oh, jobs. On everybody's mind. How many of you are concerned about the job market? I would think so. You should be. We have been inundated by Romney and Obama's ads on television. You can't escape them. Hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars are being spent right now on these ads. Yes? Yeah. Of those you have seen, how many of you have seen any of them in which Romney or Obama talk about their record? I haven't. They don't have a record to run on. By the way, Governor Gary Johnson has more administrative experience as we speak than both Romney and Obama combined. But they're not running on their record. Neither one has a record to run on. How many of you seen any of these ads that talk about their ideas, new, old, good, or otherwise? I haven't. They don't have any ideas. And basically, if you saw the debates, it basically is, my program is less bad than your program. That's pretty much it. What are they using these phenomenal amounts of money to do? They are taking out these ads showing how inept the other one is, and we agree with both of them. They don't have a clue with regard to jobs. Not a clue. We do. They talk about, let's give a tax break here, a little tax incentive there, kind of nibbling around the edges, won't make any difference. This is a huge problem. I don't need to convince you of that. And it needs an institutional response. We will repeal the income tax. Now, think of this. This is not a soundbite situation. You're going to have to give me a couple of minutes. Today, our products, they're right here. You can look at them. Our agricultural products, our manufactured products, have a competitive disadvantage. Why? For example, when they are exported to a foreign country, they're artificially more expensive because they paid taxes on them before they leave our shores. The companies that make them have income taxes to pay, so that increases, that goes into the price of the goods. They pay payroll taxes, again, increases the price of the goods, and then they're competing with goods around the world that have not paid taxes on them, giving our products a competitive disadvantage. Same thing in reverse. We have products around the world that come into our country as imports, I don't care, from Singapore, from Brazil, from Japan, wherever, that have not paid taxes on them, competing with our goods that have, then they all pay the same sales taxes. Are you with me? If we were to repeal the income tax and go to a retail consumption tax, all of the various products, domestic, foreign, whatever, would pay the same taxes, would level the playing field. Again, I was in an airplane. I do that a lot, as I'm saying. And I was sitting next to a man from Nike, an executive from Nike, you know, the shoe manufacturer. We were talking about this. Literally, his eyes got big. He said, Judge Gray, I hadn't thought of this before. This is sensational. Do you realize that if we were to repeal the income tax, most companies would bring their manufacturing back to the United States of America? What does that mean? Millions and millions of jobs. We will not only have jobs in San Francisco area, Middle West, anywhere around the country. Millions, it'll be at reverse outsourcing. You can say, oh, ain't it awful, all you want to. You can pass all these laws if you want to. You cannot repeal the law of supply and demand. This will make an institutional change that will create millions of jobs. By the way, talk about collateral benefits. Today, the General Accountability Office estimates that we as individuals and companies spend somewhere between $260 and $600 billion every year simply keeping tax records and preparing your income tax. All of that money would be saved without even talking about what your taxes would be. That is a good... Imagine making business decisions for business reasons instead of tax reasons. Imagine making personal decisions for personal reasons instead of tax reasons. A lot of people, for example, you get to be my age, you have an empty nest, so to speak, and instead of your 4-bedroom house, you'd really rather stop mowing the grass and stop having all of the problems that go with it. You'd rather have a condominium somewhere. You want to sell it, but oh no, my goodness, if I were to sell it, we'd have capital gains like you wouldn't believe, so you stay here. All of that would be gone. Those would be good things. But there are 4 groups that I can come up with that do not like that idea, adamantly opposed to it. Who would they be? Well, first of all, the tax accountants, the tax attorneys. H&R Block will not vote for me. Okay, I can live with that. Second group, of course, the people that work for the IRS. They'd have to change jobs, and I don't see anybody crying crocodile tears. In fact, by the way, tangentially, does anybody here feel that our income tax system is fair, equitable, and workable? I don't think anybody would be particularly sorry to have that gone. That's probably worth some applause too, but I'll leave it to you. But nevertheless, the third... It's not as gratifying if I have to beg, but one way or the other. The third group is huge, very powerful, adamant against it. And who is it? Members of Congress. Why? Because members of Congress get enormous political power by voting for tax breaks for their wealthy constituents. They don't want to give it up. Do not look for the Republicans or Democrats to lead the charge for change, because they don't want to give this up. It will take us, Libertarians, when we win this election, and by the way, that'll be in 2016, we're not going to win the election this time. I'll talk to you more about that. We're going to continue to run. We're going to continue to get these ideas across. We're going to have something that the United States. I have to beg for that one. You know, we're going to continue to do this. And by the way, okay, I'm on this subject. We have something, not only ideas, not only background and all of that, because we do, more qualified by far than Obama, who's been president for 3 and something years, and Biden, who hasn't been out of government since the 1970s. You lose touch. Romney, you know, I'll tip my cap to him for the Olympics and some of his Bain Capital stuff. But Paul Ryan hasn't had a job outside of government since he graduated from college. You know, he's just, you don't get the common sense. But nevertheless, we have something that the American people will crave or even demand if they realize that we're viable. And that is, we will put in a coalition government. We will put in, of course, once we have our administration, yes, of independents and libertarians, but also Republicans and Democrats, assuming that they agree with our approach of financial responsibility and social tolerance. And if they do, then we get this mindless, selfish politics going on in Washington today, which everybody is fed up with, and rightfully. You know, we'll have Republicans in our administration say, you know, Democrats, go out, talk with your colleagues, get them on board. We'll give credit to anybody that has a good idea, regardless of their philosophy, party. Anybody that embraces a good idea, all the credit in the world. We will start working together to put these things into play. At any rate, so politicians do not look for Republicans and Democrats to lead the charge for change. But when we're in there, we'll get such public mandates, get such public attention, that we will get the people. And if your member of Congress isn't voting for this, you will talk to them, because they are putting their selfish interests ahead of yours. Go talk to them. It will work. Then there's the fourth group. The fourth group are those wealthy constituents, the ones that have mastered the system, that really have those tax breaks, not paying their taxes. Think General Electric if you want to, but there are others. I am told that 60% of the lobbyists today in Washington are there simply to get tax breaks for their wealthy constituents. It wouldn't bother me at all to have 60% of those people go home. So these are things that we can do. I'm going to answer your question with regard to jobs. It is not the position of government to give you contentedness with jobs. That ain't there. That's yours. That's yours. But we will. When Governor Johnson was governor of New Mexico, and he will say he didn't create one job in the private sector. And he's right, because he's modest. But what he did do was make the government procedures, regulations more streamlined. We do need regulations, I'm certainly acknowledging that, but much more streamlined, much more understandable, much more user-friendly. That's what he did, and as a result, more private sector jobs were created per capita than any other state in the country while he was governor. That's what we will do in the United States of America too. Okay, so that takes care of jobs. That addresses the economy, and that addresses education. I'm proud of this. These are ideas. We have, as you'll see, if you want some, I don't know, do we have any handouts here? I'm assuming that we do. I've got some with me, but you will see that the slogan for our campaign is, good government is easy. Watch. It's not just what we talk about, although I think we have ideas. It's not just what, you know, our backgrounds are, although they're good ones. Governor Johnson has done it. That's why he is the best candidate for president that I know of. So now I'm going to talk to you about something else, because I'm spreading the alarm with regard to the biggest security threat to the United States of America, which is a failed economy. Again, you know, you talk about ancient Rome and the rest of that. And I've spent some time on it. Now I want to go to something equally important. What makes our country special? Why is it that even now, people around the world would give anything to be able to come and live in our country? Give anything to be citizens of the United States of America. They still love America. They still love, basically, Americans. They don't like our government, and I can't say I blame them. I don't like it particularly either. What is it that makes us special? And the answer is the soul of the United States of America is our freedoms and our liberties. And our soul is under attack today by our very own government. I was a lifelong Republican until the passage of the so-called Patriot Act. And I could no longer, as a matter of conscience, stay in tune with or be a part of any group that would condone, much less assist, this direct frontal attack on our civil liberties. We come at Mr. Obama from the left. I will represent, and if he were here, I would say so to his face. No one that has liberal values would have embraced the Patriot Act, which he has done. No one that represents and cares about liberal values would have signed the National Defense Authorization Act. Do you know what that is? Do you know what that is? Anyone in our country, citizen or not, if they were labeled a terrorist by the executive department, we could be detained, translation, we could be arrested. We could be held without charges indefinitely, and we could be rendered. That means we could be deported to a foreign country. Guess what's going to happen then? We could be tortured. That is not what we stand for. He signed it. We come at him from the left. We would actually, and I encourage you, we have endorsed the so-called SAFE initiative here in California. It's on the ballot. The SAFE initiative would repeal the death penalty in the state of California. I will venture to say that no matter what people's political philosophy is, I've seen this with my own eyes. I've worked with it. The death penalty is not working. We are treating the victims, the families of the victims, the ones left behind, as pawns in a political game, and it is an ugly thing to see. Yes, if you lose your loved one to somebody that's vicious, you want the maximum penalty for that person, and I understand that. But if they knew that the maximum penalty were to be life without possibility of parole, they'd be satisfied and go on with their lives. I was involved only on the bench with one death penalty case. I actually had the preliminary hearing when I was still on the municipal court. That was about 1987. This was a bad man, by the way. As best we can determine, he went to 4 different AM, PM mini-marts at night, and actually he didn't believe the signs, which says we don't have more than $300 in cash. He actually robbed them, as best we can tell, and then after the non-resisting clerk gave him the money, he actually executed 5 people by shooting them in the back of the head. A bad guy. He was convicted and sentenced to death in 1988. That was 24 years ago. He's still on death row. He still has not had his first appeal filed. Until 10 years ago, he didn't even have any attorneys representing him. I'm here to tell you that it costs minimum, conservatively speaking, 7 times more the amount of money to process somebody for the death penalty, with all of the protections and all of the attorneys and all of the transcripts and all of this other stuff, than it would to prosecute somebody for life without possibility of parole, convict them, give them all of their appeals, and keep them in prison the rest of their lives. So that's from a financial standpoint. Plus, you've seen, with regard to the innocent projects and the rest, with the various testing, the DNA testing now, we actually have sentenced people to death, and it would be an atrocity to have this happen. One way or the other, we support the repeal of the death penalty. Romney and Obama are on one side, we are on the other, on so many issues. In fact, they are so similar, I call them Robomni. They're interchangeable. We are there. With regard to these military conflicts, they are competing with each other to see who's going to bomb Iran first. Who's going to go to war with Iran? We say, no, we are not going to bomb Iran. We're not going to go to war with Iran unless Iran attacks us or our allies, just with anybody else in the world. Critically important to our country. Can you imagine the catastrophe we would inflict upon ourselves and the rest of the world if we would start bombing Iran? Absolute categoric mistake. We will continue with the diplomatic issues, we would continue with sanctions, all the rest of that sort of stuff, but we're not going to do that. We come at Romney from the right. We really would, as we're saying, reduce the size, the intrusion of this obese federal government, the one that has usurped so much power that is inappropriate. There is nothing in the Constitution of the United States of America, and nothing practical either, that says that the federal government should be involved in education. Nothing. Get them out. Same thing, the energy, we've talked about those things. The soul of our country is under attack by our very own government, and we are going to reclaim this. I would tell you, good start, I would tell you, where's Paul Revere? Why is no one spreading the alarm? Because when you lose your liberties and your freedom, your very soul to the government, you almost never get it back. We were Governor and I are not together very often. We were both together in Tampa right before the Republican National Convention, honestly trying to talk with Ron Paul supporters and everything there, and pretty successful at doing it. When we were there on Saturday, before the convention, we saw headlines in the Tampa Tribune, front page headlines saying the Obama administration is not going to be flying drones over Tampa during the Republican National Convention. What does that mean? That's the exception. Normally they would be. I believe that that's true. We are having drones flying over our towns and cities now, doing what? Surveilling us. We say no. We say there will not be any drones surveilling anybody in our country unless it's attached to a judicial warrant. This is not what we do. My father was a federal judge in Los Angeles, one of the heroes of my life. I have lots of friends now, actually, one way or another, that are federal judges in Central District of California. They're not wimps. If the FBI, CIA, some federal agents come to federal judges with anything close to probable cause, saying this person is involved in terrorist activities, plotting, whatever, they'll get a warrant. But if you have this without the judicial process, the judicial review, it is ripe for abuse, and I guarantee you it is being abused. It is not what we stand for. We stand up for this. So that is what we say. I want to leave time for your questions. You've been awfully quiet, except for on occasion a little bit of clapping, but that's fine. I want to leave you with what we're doing. As I say, I will go to my end of my life believing completely that had we been a part of these 3 presidential debates and 1 vice presidential debate, and I'm absolutely grief-stricken, and I've not been able to debate Joe Biden. I was really but we're not in those debates, so we're not seen as viable, and we're not going to win the election. Why should you vote for Governor Gary Johnson and Judge Jim Gray? For any reason that I can think of. Every reason that I can think of. First of all, and it's kind of trite, but it makes sense to me. You vote for the lesser of 2 evils, what do you get? You still get evil. A wasted vote is voting for somebody that does not represent you. In fact, I'd go beyond that and say that in California, it's very clear that Obama's going to take the state. And in fact, Romney isn't even campaigning here. So a vote for Romney in California is a wasted vote. And in fact, my sister lives up the street here, Long Street in Lafayette. She's a Democrat. She talks to her Democratic friends and says, you know something? Obama's going to win in California. He doesn't even need our votes. It's a wasted vote for us to vote for Obama. We're going to vote for Governor Gary Johnson. We need to do well enough to be able to qualify for federal funding. That means 5% of the vote nationwide. If we do that, we will then be entitled to those federal funds, which is fine for funding our campaign as we go, but also to show the viability, get people's attention. If we can be seen as viable, we win. With our ideas and that coalition government. Get us that 5%. This is the most meaningful vote I believe that you can make in this upcoming presidential upcoming campaign. And final thought there. If you are a Republican and Romney does not represent you, it's a wasted vote to vote for Romney because you're telling the Republican Party this candidate is acceptable. If you don't, as a Republican, vote for Romney and you vote for someone else, the Republican Party will get that message. Wait a minute, our candidate is losing our own supporters. What? Oh, you don't like our military involvement. You don't like this war on drugs. You don't like the financial response. They will change. Same thing if you were a Democrat and Obama does not represent you. Same deal. You're telling the Democratic Party that this is okay to sign the National Defense Authorization Act or the Obama ran with that sort of thing. So I believe in this. I will leave you and then I will ask for questions. And that's the most fun part for me. Oh, let's see, I haven't done abortion and I've done the environment, so I guess I'll do abortion. I do not speak for the Libertarian Party. I don't know anyone else does either. Same thing for Democrat. You know, nobody speaks for the party. So what is the Libertarian position on anything? I can help on some of these things. On abortion, there isn't one. You know, abortion is all across the map. Governor Gary Johnson and I are both pro-choice. I mean, that's just where we are. We believe, I personally believe that a woman should have the right to her own body until the fetus becomes, the brain becomes viable. And at that point, it's an entirely different situation. In fact, I don't know, maybe a month before the brain becomes viable, just to make sure. But otherwise, Roe v. Wade is the rule of the land, and otherwise, it's a state issue. People keep bringing this up. We shouldn't even be talking about abortion anymore. It's a wedge issue that people are intentionally bringing up to try to get votes and pander to people, preying on their fears, etc. But that's where we stand. Abortion is just not something that the Libertarian Party, really any other party particularly, I think, has a flank on. With regard to the environment, property issues, property rights really do address environmental pollution issues. Think trout streams. What's he doing now? England, all of the trout streams, as far as I know, are privately owned. So if I have a trout stream down here and upstream, you pollute my stream, I can sue you, track it down, sue you. It's pretty, and they have the cleanest, clearest trout streams, much more than ours. So that's an issue that really, that we don't need to have the EPA. We don't need to. The private justice system will take care of it. And that's true too. You know, you burn my property, that sort of stuff. That works. The problem comes, obviously, if you're talking about polluting the oceans, if you're talking about the groundwater, you're talking about the air, a lot harder to do. So we need an environmental protection agency for those reasons. We will continue to have that, but it'll be reduced. Let's focus on it, make it a little more user-friendly. This cap and trade stuff, I think, is just more bureaucracy. We don't favor that stuff at all. But we do believe in regulations, because those things are harder. Those things are harder. So that would take care of those issues. I'm going to leave you with a comment. Thomas Jefferson, hero of mine. Maybe you've heard of the fellow. And when we finally ratified the Constitution of the United States of America, he was in France at the time, but he wrote a letter back and said, you know, congratulations. The Constitution of the United States, again, is just an enormously important document. But in order to safeguard this fragile democracy, this fragile republic we have, we're going to need to have a revolution every generation. Why? Because the private interests will inveigle their way into power and will sap our vitality and sap our strength. How many generations has it been since Thomas Jefferson said that? And one of the most proud things I can tell you, one of those overwhelmingly humble things that I can tell you, and truly one of the most exciting things that I can tell you is, finally, at long last, this revolution is here. And it takes the form of Governor Gary Johnson and Judge Jim Gray. We need your help. We are here for you. We are here to make our country back to what we want our country to be. We are losing our prosperity, our equal opportunity, and our freedoms. And we're going to get them back with your help. Thank you for the opportunity of sharing thoughts with you, and I look forward to your questions.